things begin to build up in the body, but recreation, from time to time, lightens the body systems, and this is also a justification for tourism. When you begin to do things that in areas, beautiful areas that you enjoy right from within, you just derive pleasure from inside of you. It has a way of relieving you of so many pressures, and it makes you healthier. So that's the justification for tourism. Lastly, we have one justification for tourism which has to do with education. Now, so many people learn so much in traveling to places which they have never been before, and as a result of this, they widen their horizon and their scope. They know about other people, their cultures, their behaviors, and some persons can even write papers and publish these papers as a result of what they have learned just from tourism. So you can see that tourism is not an outright wastage of any resource which you may be thinking. So apart from the play, apart from the leisure involved in it, there is also serious thing to learn from tourism. So while you relax, while you play, you still keep your head, going, learning so much. So that's enough justification for tourism. So now let's look at the next question. You say, what is trade? Trade has to do with the exchange of goods and services, and there must be two parties involved for trade to occur. One party may be the one buying, and the other party may be the one selling. So when these two parties come together, and there is exchange of goods and services, we say that trade. We refer to that as trade. And now the next question there is that discuss the two divisions of international trade. But one division is of international trade is import trade. Import trade is a buying of goods and services from another country into one's own country. Whereas export trade, on the other hand, is the selling of goods and services produced in one's country to another country. Lastly, let's take this question. It says, give reasons for the high volume of trade between Nigeria and developed countries. In Nigeria, one reason for this is that we depend or rely so much or prefer, foreign products to locally made products. So as this continues, as long as this continues or becomes or continue to be a habit in Nigeria, this volume of trade between Nigeria and other developed countries will continue to be high. And differences in climate is another reason. Differences in technology is another reason where we have high volume of trade between Nigeria and other developed countries. We now have favorable market. Nigeria has a very large and favorable market, where the products from developed countries are sold. So these continue to increase the volume of trade between Nigeria and other developed countries. Now let's look at satellite remote sensing. One is satellite. Satellite is an artificial body placed in the orbit around the Earth or another planet. No, not only the Earth. So that's why we say around the Earth or maybe another planet, in order to obtain information, or for communication, basically. A satellite is a celestial body, which orbits the Earth or any other body, and it could be natural, like the moon, or man-made. What's remote sensing now? Remote sensing is a science, and in most cases, an art of acquiring information about the Earth's surface without actually being in contact with it. And this is usually done by sensing and recording reflected or emitted energy and processing, analyzing and applying this information which is obtained. There are processes involved in remote sensing. And these processes at times may be seen as requirements or things that must be in place for us to say that remote sensing is effectively, taken care of. One is the energy source. Two, we have the radiation and the atmosphere. Three, interaction with the target. Four, recording of energy by the sensor. And there is transmission, reception, and processing. We have interpretation and analysis. And finally, application. From the illustration here, the remote sensing processes. The first one is the energy source or the illumination. The first requirement there is the energy source, which is usually from the sun in this case. That's the natural, but we may have other man-made sources. And when there is availability of the energy source which illuminates, and passes through the atmosphere, there is radiation from the energy source, and it passes through the atmosphere, and as it passes there is interaction, and on getting to the target is that object within the surface of the earth that we want to study, that we want to find out information about. So from the source, the energy source, it passes through the atmosphere and it gets to the target. And once the energy, makes its way from the source to the target, there are many reactions or many things may take place. It's either it is transmitted or it may, penetrate the target or be reflected back. Now, like I said before, it interacts with the target depending on the properties of the target and also the radiating energy from the source. And when this happens, from the interaction with the target, there is what we call recording of the energy by the sensor. From the diagram here you can see you have the source, the target, you have the sensor. So the sensor will record the information obtained from the interaction that has taken place on the target. And from there is transmission and reflection as well as processing of the information recorded by the sensor. And from there we also have interpretation and further analysis of what has been recorded. And from there, as a last process, we have the application. Now, having obtained the information we require, how do we apply it? That becomes the last process. Now let's look at satellite remote sensing. Satellite remote sensing has to do with the study of the Earth's surface and the atmosphere. It uses powerful cameras to scan the planet, to obtain information and to send back the data about the environment to ground-based stations. Application of satellite remote sensing, SRS, satellite remote sensing. So many applications we have here. Remote sensing, it could be applied in forestry. Remote sensing is used for assessment of the environmental conditions in the forest. And when the distribution of forest species is known, this can be incorporated into detailed and expansive map for studies and referrals. Now, number two, we have environmental studies. How do we make use of remote sensing in environmental studies? Remote sensing is applied in environmental studies to predict the nature of weather, to determine direction and speed of wind, and to determine possible periods of flooding and how to manage this issue. Agriculture is also a way where remote sensing is applied. Remote sensing provides satellite imagery for agricultural and crop assessment, agriculture and crop assessment. Now, it also gives information about crop health and soil analysis. 4, we have telecommunication. Remote sensing has made it possible for regional, national, and international communication without being in direct contact with human beings. Finally, we have transportation. Remote sensing has aided in the movement of aeroplanes, jets, etc. So we want to see the relationship between GIS and remote sensing. Now, one is that both remote sensing and GIS look at spatial data in different layers. We talk about spatial data, we talk about data in space. And they both also take the form of computer software to create, analyze, and manipulate spatial data. And they both also see beyond the human eye. Now, the eyesight that we're talking about, infrared. And finally, they both can observe large areas in less time. That makes them very, very useful when we're looking at mapping a very wide area. So let's also look at the application of GIS. Now, GIS is applied in defense. GIS is useful in military operations as they are special in nature. A military use GIS for terrain assessment, for battle management or battlefield management, intelligence and cartography. GIS is also applied in agriculture. Here, GIS is useful in agriculture for production of quality crops with high yields, production of livestock animals with maximum output within a short period of time, as well as the provision of possible means of storage of food for the future. GIS is also applied in urban development.